Thanks so much, Terry, for that wonderful introduction. It saves me telling you a little bit of my background because Kerry's covered it really well. It's the relevant part of what she said was that I was president of the Australian Society of Orthodontists, the ASO, from 2004 through to 2006, and as president, one is able to press buttons, as you know. And okay, so why I'm presenting, and I am presenting about the program which I call Give a Smile, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. But I'll also say that why am I here? Well, it came from Kerry, who sent me a really lovely letter of congratulations after I received the membership board of Australia. And anyway, that's where it started, and it's she said at that time, she said she'd love to have me talking to you guys, and that's why I'm here. And thanks also to Priya, who's done a wonderful job in orchestrating me being here today. So I'll tell you a little bit about the origins of Give a Smile. Now that you know that I'm orthodontist, I have retired, fully retired now, and much to Paul Schneider's annoyance, you know, he's rather hoping that I'd continue on and continue to be examined, but I can't, so it's because I'm fully retired. But it's lovely to be here, as I said. Lovely to see some people that I know and meet others that I hadn't met before. But I'll tell you about the origins of Give a Smile. It started in 2002, so 2 years before I became president. I was asked to be on the board or the council of the ASO as a lead up to being president. Much to the annoyance of my wife, because I'd spent, you know, I've been in various positions at various stages before, and she said, it was over in Perth, I remember exactly where it happened, it was on our way down south down towards Margaret River. She said, okay, if you're going to be president, I want you to do what about doing something useful? And I said, of course I'll do something useful. Good continuing education and good this and that and the other. She said, no. She said, what about doing something really useful? And so she sends her apologies today, by the way. She would have been here, but she's looking after one of our grandchildren, which took precedence. So she would, and I always acknowledge her for the genesis of the idea, because from the question of do something useful, no, it was more an order than a question. What came of that was the initiative or project called Give a Smile. It did take quite a while, and because she had said, do something useful. In other words, give back to the community what you're good at. Not so much dollars and cents, which we do give to the community and give back, but give back what we singularly were able to do, and that's our skills as an orthodontist. And so, and in part of the conversation that she had with me, she said, and who are the people most in need of your skills? And I said, well, it's obvious, it's the people who can't afford orthodontic treatment, and therefore the people in the less well-off sections of the community should be the recipients. So the origins of Give a Smile really came from an idea or a command that she gave me, and I always like to acknowledge that, because she says she's very good at ideas, not very good at putting them together, but very good at ideas. She allows me to put them together. I did put it together pretty well, and so that was the start of it, and it did take a long time, and it was all to do with giving back, as I said, and rather than money, it was to do with skills, as I said, and it created a ready-made vehicle for giving back to the community. It turned out, I knew this anyway, that there are a number of members of our association, the Australian Society of Orthodontists, the ASO that I mentioned. I knew that as a group there was generosity in that group anyway. But this provided a vehicle for those who just hadn't got around to it for one reason or another, who needed something to link on to. So what it was, not to put too fine a point on it, will you give me the when I get, it could go on. Thanks, because I recorded it. Okay. Anyway, so what it was, and Kerry did touch on that. It was a program which we put to every member of the Australian ASO, and at that stage there were 400. There are some more now, and for every member to who was willing to do it, to put up their hand and say, yes, I'll become part of this program, and pledge to take one patient per year from the public dental health system around Australia, and there are a lot of them, to take that patient and treat them in their practice for no fee at all.
Wow.
And to give you an idea of how well it was accepted within 2 years of releasing it. Kerry's exactly right, it was in 2005, the midterm of, or early of that first year of my presidency, and 2 years after that we'd achieved a wonderful figure of about 2/3 of all members of the ASO who made that pledge. Some of them couldn't do it anyway because they were working in hospital positions or government positions, and so it really meant most of them. There were a few who didn't like the idea, and that's fine, not everyone has to like it, but it's a good idea, and it was a good idea. And it created a ready-made vehicle for giving back to the community. Because, and we're all in this position, and as a graduate in orthodontics, you are definitely in the position of being a position of great privilege. And because we are in a position of great privilege, it behoves us to give back at the stage, not only at the end of your career, but during your career, and it made the perfect vehicle for doing that as you went through. Of course, it gave members, or Give a Smile orthodontists as they became known, a feel-good effect, and it was good that they felt good about that. Not every time, because you're dealing with a demographic that varies a little bit. So most times they're good, sometimes they're not so good. But it certainly gave Give a Smile orthodontists that good feeling of giving back at the time that they could give back. I think, I guess any time is a good time to set up a program of giving back to the community, but why did it work? I think 2005 was at a perfect time where and right across the age range of ASO members, of the specialist orthodontists, there was a feeling that they wanted to give back, and perhaps it was just at the right time we suggested it. I suggested it to them, hit them hard, like my wife had hit me hard, and I think it worked because it was a good idea and it came at the right time. It still continues to work. Now having retired, now that I've moved it on, as one must, to the next generation, and a different demographic will look after it, and they've got different ideas than those that I had. But it is working, and it's still working very well. Its financial effect was wonderful. It works out that when you think about it, for 3/4 of membership, sort of 250 or whatever it was, 2/3, 250, 260, 270 members of the ASO, remember there were 400 in total, each taking a patient per year. The effect of that was probably about $1 million a year. And so, and I think it's more now, but it certainly was that at that stage, which was a really wonderful thing to be able to say to governments who needed to have it explained to them, okay, what good is this program doing? Well, I'll tell you how good it's doing. It's doing you good by not having to put your hands in your pocket, this is talking to the government, to the tune of $1 million. I knew that there'd be a strong and positive public relations aspect to this, But that's not the reason that we were doing it. It was a nice spin-off that we were doing it, and that it had that PR effect, but it's not the reason for doing it. The reason for doing it, as I've always said, it's because we're obliged. We want to do it. We want to give back. And that's the main reason for doing it. But if there's a side effect of being a PR positive, that's a good thing, and you know, we all need positive PR at this stage. So to give you an idea how the program works, I had to deal with, and this was part of the organisation, part of the getting it together, and it did take a year, maybe 2 years, maybe more. That I had to deal with every health department in each state and territory. So that's 8 in Australia, and they're all different, as you can imagine, and they operate in a different way. Most of them have public dental waiting lists. Some of them don't. And those that didn't, we had to organise something a little bit different in terms of getting the patient across to the willing give a smile orthodontist. But so the selection of patients is not by as a general rule. I know that's changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but for when it started, the selection of the patient was not by the Give a Smile orthodontist, but by the state or territory health department, those patients would come to them for treatment, and that they would be deemed appropriate for Give a Smile, and they would be sent across to Give a Smile to be treated. We did need, of course, willing members in each state to act as liaison persons, as we call them, to enable that patient to be then handed across to an orthodontist, an appropriate orthodontist in their area. You couldn't do that centrally, federally, because it's no matter how well you know everyone, you don't know them that well. The people who will know them better will be the people in the state area. So at each state branch in the Australian Society of Orthodontists, we have 5, I think, called. And at each state branch we organised a liaison person, but we did need, because that's right, yeah, Tasmania is linked to the Victorian branch of the ASO, so we did need to appoint someone in Tasmania. In the end, we appointed 2, because what I didn't want to have happen was the main person hit by the bus, and then within the thing falling down. So it's never happened that anyone's been hit by the bus, but you did need a 2IC, a second in command. And at every Congress and at every year, either at the ASO Congress or the ASO Foundation meeting, which is the other year, we've had a meeting of all those state branch liaison people, plus everyone else who's involved in them. To tell you a little bit more, some state, because every state and territory branch is different in how they organise things, there are 3 states which require co-payments. One is here in Victoria, the other one is South Australia, the other one's Western Australia. The other states and territories, their service is gratis. It's fine, that's not our decision, it's the decision of the state government whether co-payments are required, and it's in their wisdom. Victoria decides that they need a co-payment. Yes, it's dropped considerably since Give a Smile started, but it's a few $100s, and that money in WA, by the way, it's more than a few $100s. It's closer to $2,000. It was $1,700, but that money, which would have normally gone to that health department if that patient had been treated by that health department, that in every case, and I had to speak to all of them, but in every case they said, we don't want the money because we're not treating them. Give a Smile, Give a Smile orthodontist is treating that patient. That money would come to Give a Smile. We had to set up, and we had to be very careful how we set up an account to receive that money. So it was really interesting. They're called co-payments, as I think I said, and those co-payments in the first, I think every year, the total somewhere around 40,000, and it was really lovely to be able to give that money at the end of that first year, second year, to charities that within those states, by the way, that had links to, well, that were similar to the aims of Give a Smile. We were told after a year or so by, you can imagine the accountants telling us and the lawyers telling us, we shouldn't be giving that money away, we should be, and it's absolutely right when it was explained, you should be using that money to make Give a Smile work as efficiently as possible. And that's absolutely true. We were working, and I'll talk in a minute about the pro bono support we've enjoyed, but we did need that money to have, to make sure Give a Smile worked and had a public face as strong as possible. And so at the end of each year we've given a lot less than that to different charities, but the idea was to give it to charities okay, there's some argument within the ranks of ASO members about where the money should go. Should it go back to charity or should it be used for Give a Smile? I feel strongly that I agree with the accountant and the solicitor that were by our side in this, that it should be there to make Give a Smile work as efficiently as possible. So we modified, so that was a modification a couple of years into the program, but I mentioned a minute ago the pro bono support for Give a Smile. The committee, as you can imagine, which was based in Melbourne, well, it just was because I'm a Melbourne person, and I've got people around me who were very, very strong in this, not only orthodontists, but other people outside orthodontics who had a similar view to giving back. And it was really lovely, having moved Give a Smile onto the different demographic. As I said, I don't know quite how the committee's working, but the way it worked with me was that we'd meet 4 or 5 times a year, usually at my place or one of the other members' places, and we'd meet over dinner. Okay, well, there's a fair bit of talking, but it was useful talking because through that we got together some good people, and some very good ideas came out of it. The pro bono support, apart from the committee, which worked very hard and very well, we knew that it had to be absolutely watertight from a legal point of view, so we got a legal firm, Alan Arthur Robinson, to work for us. I think they've gone into a different name now. Accounting and audited services, which were done pro bono, but then as time went on, we certainly paid for them. Most of these people, I think those ones that were pro bono, certainly from a PR point of view, when we tried very hard to get as much positive PR as we could, and that was done just from us. But it didn't take long before we realised that we needed to secure the services of a specialist public relations person, and there was a cost to that. So that was one of the areas that the cost, plus the administrative assistant who'd been and still is the administrative assistant for Give a Smile. She needed to be paid very well, and she was, because she plays a very important part in making it work. But just to go back to that PR stuff in a moment, it's very interesting. Because it's a good story. There's no question. Give a Smile is a very good story, and we had some good press and good media support and good. But at the end of the day, newspapers and media are interested in bad, dark underbelly stories. We couldn't give them one because ours was too good, and it continues to be good. But that's a challenge that the PR people face. But it's important that the community understands and knows what we're doing, what we're standing for, and that we're giving back, and that we're making all of those things that I've mentioned so far. But one of the pro bono support persons, and I hope I haven't forgotten anyone, but he became our pro bono ambassador. You probably know the actor comedian Shane Bourne, and Shane has been fabulous in doing interviews and being the talking head of Give a Smile on a number of occasions. And he, depending on his requirement, on his movements and his activities, he's been very happy to be supportive of Give a Smile. And that came just through because one of the committee, or the wife of one of our committee members, she was also on the committee, happened to know Shane socially. And he knowing it was a good idea, or realising it was such a good idea, was very happy to be that. So we've had this pro bono support from a lot of people, but of course one has to thank the Give a Smile orthodontists, those large proportion of ASO members who have said, I'll take a patient per year and treat them for nothing in their own practice. And whilst, as I suggested before, it hasn't been absolutely perfect in every case, it's been pretty good in most cases. And you'll always get some who don't appreciate, as you would, particularly from a demographic that's of that ilk. But by and large, the reaction to it has been fabulous. We had a lot of offers of help, and there's a lovely trickle-down effect of such a good program, and its feel-good effect, as I mentioned before. So other specialties thought it was good and wanted to set up their own one. As I say, good stories in the media. This is not so much a trickle-down, they're very difficult to get. But in terms of the responses, I mentioned the ASO members. Whilst not everyone thought it was a great idea, almost everyone did. And almost everyone put their hand up to say, I'll take a patient per year and treat them in the practice. Because the reality of it is that it doesn't make a great deal of difference. If you're taking one patient a year, so that you might have, typically someone will be, their course of treatment will be 2 years, let's say. So you might have 2 patients per year in your practice that are active patients, and to Give a Smile patients in your practice, which is not that much, and it doesn't have that much effect. And that was the reaction of the young orthodontists, the ones who are newly out there doing it, the ones who were about to go out there, and I was in close contact with that group as well, and they all loved the idea and couldn't wait till they were out in a position that they could then become Give a Smile orthodontists. The responses from the state and territory health departments, well, that was all that was good, but I had to contact them as somewhat less welcoming than others, as we might say. But I think they all realised that it was a good scheme and a good idea and worthwhile supporting, which they did. The community, as I said, was there's the community of Give a Smile patients who think it's a wonderful idea. There's a wider community who probably don't know as much about Give a Smile as we'd love them to. It's a bit like that old thing, the wider community don't know the difference between an orthodontist and a general dentist who does orthodontics, for instance. So it's probably a similar thing, but it's important that we as specialist orthodontists and certainly on the Give a Smile program, that give as much positive message to the community as we can as to what Give a Smile is about. The government finally, when we put runs on the board and told them that it was worth $1 million a year, saving of their purse, they thought it was a good idea, and we did have some lovely government support in terms of launching Give a Smile and with various keystone events. It's interesting, the overseas, the American Association of Orthodontists, who did have a program, but it was a very small deal, created another program sometime after Give a Smile was created, because we got some media exposure to the American scene as well, and it wasn't so long after that they created their scheme. New Zealand have created a scheme called Make-A-Wish Foundation, which is based on that, and the person who was about to be the chairman of that contacted me and sat down with me and had a good chat about how Give a Smile works. So it was really lovely how it's affected other people in other parts of the world. It's probably affected a whole lot more that I don't know about. So going to the fact that on an individual basis, you do get good patients and not so good patients, but you'll always get that anywhere, even in your own practice of whatever. But it's important that we as orthodontists, I've now retired, but it was important for me when I was practicing to be there to say that I'm from a privileged situation, all of us in this room are, to give back to society in this way, and it's a very lovely thing to be able to do. So I've talked about the start of it and how it operated. Now it is up to the next generation, and the generation that I've handed it over to is a good age group. People who've been out there not that long, 10 years out in orthodontics, and they're taking it and running with it, and that's important because I think it's all very good to have set something up, but to continue to look after it until you die is not such a good thing. I think it's got to be embraced by the next generation. So that's my message. My take-home message is that we've all had a lovely life. We've been in a privileged position. Give a Smile for us orthodontists was a perfect vehicle to give back, and now it's ready to be taken over by the next generation. So thank you very much for listening.